I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but this episode feels a little bit jumbled. Like, there's no one central theme around everything, and for the most part, I'll be gravitating around a bunch of different topics. But so far, this episode is actually going to be about dogs, debates, and relationships. Just mostly because, stuff seems a little bit jumbled up. So I might as well start by unjumbling things by bringing in the very first thing I was supposed to talk about. Now, about a month ago in Berlin, hundreds of people who identify as dogs decided to gather in the city center, and the meetup went viral. Now, to be quite honest, seeing the footage and seeing that it's actually regular humans who identify as dogs, I just had one question. Who let the dogs out? Quite honestly, I'm finding this a little bit hard to fathom. Like, there's actually people that identify as dogs. Like, you're a person, but you're like, you know what, Snoop Dogg is my spirit animal. He's my spirit human, and my favorite style is doggy style. Like, come on, bruh. Like, this one seems very, very hard to fathom. And I'm not gonna lie, there are a bunch of jokes that I do have packed in for this, because it's literally people who are identifying as dogs. Like, how are there not any jokes about them? Stuff like them not feeling wanted when they go to China, because you can't really call it cannibalism, but they might make for a pretty mean delicacy. So if there were any Chinese around there, damn. But anyways, let me just read what the caption said real quick. So it says, and I quote, "A pack of dog identifying humans has prompted calls for quote-unquote animal control after footage of the Berlin meetup went viral. An estimated 1,000 people who prefer to be recognized as not humans but canines organized a gathering at the Berlin Sammerplatz railroad station in Germany, communicating only by howling or barking at one another." End quote. Now, I have questions over here, like, how they actually organized it. Is that like dog WhatsApp? Like, is it called WolfSap? Like, at the end of it, you kind of have to wonder how some of these guys thought that them identifying as dogs is particularly beneficial. Like, I can get it, maybe you like it when you and the homies are busy just chilling, and then someone's like, "Where the dogs at?" And y'all are like, "Woof woof." Or like, "Bow wow wow, yippee yo, yippee yay, where my dog's at?" And all of you guys make a bunch of noises and shit. But this feels like a bit of a troll to an extent, because how do you have, first of all, people who identify as dogs, and then second of all, over 1,000 people, or possibly 1,000 people who identify as dogs? Like, that shit is wild as hell. Although, as far as things go, I feel like it could have a plus for some of us dudes, because imagine going and saying, "No, you're a human," and then, you have a couple of females who identify as dogs busy saying, "You're a bigot, blah, blah." All you have to say, because it's perfectly warranted, is, "Bitch, don't kill my vibe." That actually makes complete sense. You can call her the B word and she isn't supposed to get offended, because, guess what she is. But all in all, I'm glad that this isn't something that happens in Africa or even in Kenya or in Nairobi, because us guys would have gone off on calling people Bosco and Rex and shit, and I'm imagining the kind of kicking around that we'd be doing to those people, which wouldn't be as hospitable, kind of like, the way people are introduced, kind of like the way I like to introduce this podcast, in a manner of saying, "Welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya." The man on the mic is a man who doesn't need to go to a vet, because clearly doggy style is not just for dogs. He's a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show used to be called Tweet Street, but Twitter changed its name to X, and I think I've said this a little too much. But anyways, for the sake of not wanting to have these episodes classified as porn videos, or sounding like a porn site, I figured I might as well get rid of it. But the story is still the same. It's a Friday episode, and as Friday episodes go, usually I like taking your feedback and having discussions from it. And normally I like to go to Twitter. I've been thinking about going to Threads, but as of now it's still Twitter. And I usually like it when you push your input on stuff that we should discuss from Twitter, whether you find it on Twitter or on Facebook or IG, and I will explain that in a second, because it's a very simple drill, almost sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. On Facebook and on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, if it ended up on a carousel or ended up as someone's reel, then the place to send it to is @Breakdown on Westside on IG or on Facebook. The DMs are always open and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. Now, I have a couple of tweets that I need to get into here, and by all means, they definitely deserve to be discussed. But before I can get into them, I want us to discuss some news that isn't really news, but it's kind of caught everyone by storm. Now, for most of us Kenyans, for most of us Nairobians, we've already heard of the story of the quote-unquote fake lawyer, aka Discount Mike Ross, that has been making waves on the news lately for the fact that he has taken part in 26 cases and won all 26 of those cases. Yet, this is someone who actually does not have a law license, but has been masquerading as a lawyer for quite some time. Now, I personally didn't think that it was this big of a story to, practically masquerade as a lawyer and do a bunch of shit and get caught with it. But this story actually caught on so much steam that like every single international media organization that I follow on IG has actually been having this story covered. Now, the guy's name is Brian Mwenda, and if you check, I think it's Hood Ratchet TV, Spiritual Word, PUBT, a bunch of others, they all have this story running. So at some point, you kind of have to wonder how interesting it was for people to see a near real life version of Suits playing out in real life. But while all of that's fine and dandy, and maybe I should be happy that a Kenyan is being recognized internationally, blah blah patriotism, on the other hand, it actually did raise a particularly interesting question, because there were quite a number of people that were saying that he should just be given the law license, and there were a lot of people, more so lawyers, that were saying that the guy needs to be charged and he needs to face the full force of the law for his actions, which sounded a bit weird because this guy was using the full force of the law to win a bunch of other cases without the legal license. Although it did raise the question of, should the guy actually go scot-free and just get a license, or should the guy actually be like put in prison and shit and not be allowed to ever practice law in his life, or something of that sort? And to be quite honest, it actually is a bit of a wild one, because on one end, you wouldn't want to give the guy a law license just like that, and then a bunch of fake lawyers start popping up all left, right, and center. And when you look at certain noble professions like law, like architecture, like medicine, you can see that they have a very direct impact towards the life situation of a lot of people. Because if you have a doctor that's not properly trained, that can mean patients dying. If you have a bad lawyer, they can end up not arguing shit well and someone ends up being sent to prison. If you have an architect that draws bad designs and doesn't take into account a bunch of shit, you can end up with a structure that can cost people millions and can also result in the deaths of different people. Like, at the end of the day, you can understand where the nobility and the seriousness for the profession is. But at the same time, this is someone who got into your profession without having gone through the full, process of becoming a lawyer, and he still bested some of you. Because it's not like the guy was going to court with a bunch of nobodies or a bunch of has-beens who don't know jack shit about the law. He went up against people much older than him who had been lawyers, and he beat them. So if anything, I think the guy should at least be recognized for what he's done. Although with that said, I do think that the reality of it is nowadays there's so many people that are getting into professions that they didn't even study for, and they're doing quite well at it, that at the very least, instead of shunning the guy and having him go to prison or charging him under the law and everything, at the very least you should probably at least give him a chance to at least become a lawyer through the right means, which is by certification, by going through the bar. Because that is what is mostly required at the end of the day. if you've gone ahead and you've passed the bar and you are fully recognized and registered, then you can go ahead and practice law. But, just saying that this guy has defrauded a system and he's broken, the integrity of a very important part of the justice system, blah, blah. Like, at the end of the day, most of the people that are arguing that this guy shouldn't get a law license or shouldn't be allowed to ever practice law or he should go to prison are mostly purists, of which most of them are usually just lawyers. At the end of it, I think if the guy can go ahead, do the bar exam and pass it, then give him his license. Because at the end of the day, when you actually think about it, it's a lot more about the result than it is about the process. Like, yes, the guy didn't follow the right process, but he's been getting the right results. So what if, instead of trying to get the guy thrown out because he didn't follow the right process, you put him on a much better path and then have him follow the right process? Wouldn't that be better than you just deciding that this guy should not be fit to practice blah blah blah? Because at the end of the day, this guy is technically famous now because y'all outed him for not being properly registered and still having won cases. If anything, after this guy is registered, he's going to be very in demand, which works out to help whoever it is that ends up taking him under his wing. So if anything, I think this is a point where the Law Society of Kenya, or the legal profession in and of itself, has to at least stop for a second and reconsider the fact that this guy might actually mean that they stop looking at the process and stop fussing so much about it and recognizing the fact that it's the results that matter, not more than the process, but nearly just as much. But anyways, I could be wrong about that. That's not entirely my field of expertise. Although then again, it's not like I actually studied relationships and everything. But I do have a bunch of tweets that I need to get into. So on to our very first case of this episode. Now, I want to play a clip for you because it fueled the caption that someone wrote, which I believe is worth discussing. So without further ado...
Yeah. What is your son's birthday?
No, that's a good one. That's a really good one, because I don't know.
You really don't know his
No,
birthday?
I don't know his birthday.
Do you consider you guys pretty close?
Yeah,
What is your daughter's favorite subject in school?
social study.
Is that true?
No.
What grade is your daughter going into?
9th grade.
What's the name of your daughter's school?
Ash Creek Elementary School.
No,
River Creek.
no,
Something Creek.
no,
What color are your daughter's eyes?
Brown.
All right, let's look. That is incorrect.
They're blue. I have a brown-eyed daughter, though.
What is your daughter's birthday?
May 17th. Oh, no, it's the 14th, and I don't know what year.
Can you name your daughter's teacher?
Mrs. Jones.
nope,
Mrs. Moore. It's not Moore?
No. I was my elementary school teacher.
Can you name their teachers?
Of course I cannot.
What are your daughter's birthdays?
Why do you do this to me?
What about her?
I give up.
Any guesses?
Oh yeah, yesterday! Horrible.
Her birthday was yesterday and you
Just
forgot
yesterday,
it.
yes.
Can you name the best friend of each of your daughters?
Mari Carmen Rojas, Jimena Lopez, Adamari Lopez, Cristina Cornejo.
Good.
Okay, now in relation to this video, the person who did the tweet said, and I quote, "When we say too many married mothers are basically single mothers, this is what we mean. Fathers and husbands that are physically present in the home but absent in all the other ways and do not participate or carry the mental load required to adequately parent. Ridiculous." End quote. Now, having watched this video, having read whatever the hell it is this woman said, because it was a woman who wrote it, I think that what she's saying is a stack of bull. And I will explain it by pulling something out of my ass, because I am not a father, so I cannot say this for certain. But for the most part, I believe that fathers, and more so just us men, we will usually hold on to information that we feel is useful and that we need to know. And let me just explain that one in a little bit, because if you were to ask how much the school fees is, we'd probably know. Because the father is expected to know how much it is, because he is the one that is expected to pay it. If you ask how much the house rent is, then the dad will probably know, because he's expected to pay that shit. If you were to ask him how much oil is required in the car, because he needs to keep the car running, and knowing a bunch of that shit is important, he might probably know. If he asks how much pressure are you supposed to put in each tire of the car that they have, he'll probably know, because he needs to know that information for whenever the hell it is he is going to add pressure to the tire, or if he's changing a flat, or if he's getting another tire or some shit. Like, at the end of the day, men usually tend to know stuff that they feel they need to know. And yes, you can say that, a bunch of us guys know about sports people, and like we'll even know like the kind of boots that Cristiano Ronaldo wears and shit. And yes, you could be right, but most of that shit we feel we need to know for the sake of top trumps and debates and shit. Like, at the end of the day, we usually like to hold on to information that we feel we need to know. Anything that we feel like we don't really need to know it, we usually don't retain it. Mostly because, as men, we are expected to do a certain number of things. We're expected to know a certain number of things. And as such, because we're expected to know that, we only have a certain amount of space in our lives, in our minds, to hold any additional extra information. Most of that will usually tend to be classified under temporary shit. If any of these men was a single father, they would probably know the child's birthday, and they would probably know the child's teachers, because guess what? They would have to know, because the child would mention it to them, and they would have to be present in things like parent-teacher conferences, or going to see the teacher whenever the teacher asks for it from like the kid's diary or some shit. Although, then again, maybe I'm pulling this one out of my ass and I don't know fuck all. So, let me leave it at that, because I have something else to discuss here, and move it on to our very next tweet of this episode. And it is a tweet that says, and I quote, "No matter how fine you are, I can't marry a woman who isn't well read. Yes, I want to marry young, like a young 19-year-old, but I'll make sure that you've graduated with a degree, or at the very worst, you have a diploma. Putting you through school is your father's work, or your parents' work. My work is to fuck you and ensure that you have children." End quote. Okay, now, I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but I feel like this guy's Delulu is the Solulu is the mindset is probably what he has for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a midnight snack. Because honestly, I don't get what the fuck this dude is saying in the entirety of what he said. Because how can you on one end say that you want a woman who is well educated, well read and shit, who has a degree, and also at the same time is 19 years old? Like, I don't get the logic in that shit. Like, let me just try and put this into a little bit of perspective. Considering that most people usually end up finishing high school at about the age of 17, 18, some even actually 19, it seems a little bit wild that someone would be like, I want to get a babe at like the age of 19, but I can't marry someone who isn't well read. Now, the only thing that can be used to explain this is, you go and you get her when she's getting into uni, or when she's in uni, and then after she's graduated, you marry her and you guys remain dating that entire time. But still, even then, like, the whole idea just sounds very, very wild and a little bit weird, to be quite honest. And I will get to the whole dating a 19-year-old and shit, just in case someone thought that I forgot that one. I haven't, but I'm gonna take a minute first to break down whatever the fuck dude is saying here. Because even though you were to take a babe who's like 17, 18, getting a diploma by the age of 19 isn't as easy. It's possible, but it's not as easy. And a lot of the ones who have gotten a diploma by that age are probably not trying to get married at the age of 19 fucking years old, alright? Getting a degree, that one's a little bit more impossible. Not unless if you have someone who's like a raging genius who finished high school at the age of like 14, 15. Of which I only know of one person who's done that, and it is not a woman, it is a guy. But anyways, that one's sort of besides the point. The main point here is you're trying to get someone who's that young to have done school, which sounds in and of itself very, very dumb and highly delusional. But with that said, let's look at the age for a little bit, because I don't know why. I don't know if I can blame the red pill community on this or just men online, but this whole obsession with going for super young women as opposed to women your own age or a couple of years younger or maybe even one or two older is just a little too weird for my liking. Like, don't get me wrong, she is 19 years old, she's above the age of 18, so technically, she's an adult and that's free for all. It's just, I don't get the appeal for going for someone who's in her late teens, is mostly mature, or at least hasn't matured or learned enough about life to, classify them as a properly grown adult and be like, you know what, I want to get this babe and make her my wife. Like, I feel like to a certain degree, some of these guys just want to go for such young babes because they're young, impressionable, and they'll listen to them and not really, stand up for whatever the fuck they believe in, and they try to take them and mold them into something. I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but for the most part, I feel like this shit for going for babes who are like 18, 19, or like in the early 20s by niggas who are like late 20s, early 30s and beyond is just a little bit wild and very, very weird. But anyways, maybe there's something that they see that I don't, maybe there's something that they know that I don't, maybe I might be wrong about this, so I'm gonna leave it at that, and I will move it on to our very final tweet. So, on to our very final tweet of this episode, and it is actually a quoted reply. So the original tweet says, and I quote, "Lying by telling someone that you love them just so that you can shag them is a very weak move," end quote. Now, the quoted reply is, and I quote, "This is the weakest move possible for real. We're grown-ups. Just be straight up about your intentions with someone. If she gives it to you, it's cool. If not, then move the hell on," end quote. Now, these two tweets were actually made by women, and I have two main statements in response to what's been said, but the reaction from both statements is going to be particularly different because on one statement y'all will agree with me, but on the other one a lot of women might feel pretty triggered and some might even hate me for it. But I'm just gonna say both of them, so here goes. Very first statement: I do not think that you need to lie to a woman with the idea of love and the promise of a long-term partnership or wanting to marry them or wanting a relationship with them just so that you can get to bang. All right, that one I clearly think is a very, very dumb thing to do and should not be done at all. My second statement though is you cannot be straightforward with a woman that you want to shag and tell them that you want to shag. That in and of itself, whichever woman tells you that is probably lying to you. Now, I know that there's a bunch of babes that after hearing that are probably feeling some type of way about me and might be thinking that I'm a bigot or there's something wrong with me. But before you lose your shits on me, let me cook on this one for a little bit, alright? Now, smarter people than me and possibly you have actually gone out and done one or two studies to gauge women's willingness to give sex based off of the kind of approach that's been given. And I kid you the hell not, the one where a guy goes and says, "Hi, how are you? I think you're really good looking and I want to shag you," are the ones that got the least sort of positive feedback ever. Because, and I kid you not, from the results of those studies, when it comes to asking women to have sex with them, the people that went and asked in a straightforward manner got a positive response rate 0% of the time. Like, it's not even a 0.0 something. No, it was a flat out 0% of the time. Now, I personally think that it's almost like a reflex for them, where it's like, yes, even though you're interested in a guy, the moment he's like, "Hi, can we have sex?" it's almost like a reflex for women to be like, no. But to be very honest, I tend to think that the reasons behind it could stem from a babe not wanting to seem like she's too easy, or them feeling like they're gonna be objectified because this guy just sees you as something that he can get his rocks off with. But either way, being completely straightforward with a woman that you just want to have sex with them or you want to have sex with them is usually yielded a positive net result for just about every guy of a percentage point of 0. So it's not really a viable option to just walk up to a girl and ask to have sex with them. Like, it doesn't work that way. Now, on the flip side, I'm not telling you to go ahead and be like, hey, you know, you're the love of my life. I've always wanted to be with you, blah, blah, so that you can get sex. Because now that's the first statement, which I said should not be done. The middle ground in all of this is you're going to have to put a little bit of fluff in it as a guy so that you can get some. Because at the end of the day, you're not just getting pussy, you're getting an entire body with that pussy. So you're gonna need to put a bunch of body around that open desire to want to have sex with this woman so that you can get some. So stuff like not flat out saying I want to have sex with you works. Stuff like, you know, complimenting her, trying to generate or create some form of a relationship, not necessarily getting into one, but creating some sort of rapport with the babe, you know, charming her, like saying a bunch of things that don't flat out state that, hey, I just want to have sex with you, will probably increase your odds as opposed to you going and saying that you want to have sex with a babe. But with that said, I do not expect that you will go to the extreme end of things and try and promise her the world and tell her that you love her, or lie to her that you love her and that you'd want to, you know, have a future with her, all in the name of sex, because that's just going a little too far. You do not need to involve the heart for matters that involve the reproductive organs. Keep it at the reproductive organs, play with her head if that's what you feel like doing, but do not feed a flat out lie. Personally, I am not the type of person to go out and lie to you and tell you that I love you for pussy. I'd much rather play around with my words just so that you know this guy wants pussy, but this guy isn't trying to promise me love or anything of that sort. Although then again, I might be wrong in my sense of direction, and you know, maybe there are some women who once told, hey, I want to have sex with you, were saying yes. I could be wrong about that as well. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. On Facebook and on IG, it is at Breaktime on Westside. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end of this episode and of this season. The shortened episodes begin next week, or at least from the next episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you guys on the next break.